So you may have heard there's a new affix on the beta. We tested Mythic Plus for Dragonflight. It's called Thundering, and nobody likes it. And it's honestly not surprising because it's not good. It's really bad. I think zero people actually like this affix, but for more reasons than you think. And I want to give you my thoughts on this affix because I think it's a lot more nuanced than a lot of people realize. Unfortunately, the days we live in now, especially in World of Warcraft, everybody's just going to look for the quickest soundbite and they're going to try to run with that as if it's a full-fledged opinion. So you hear a lot of weird statements being made about this affix that they don't really make sense when you actually play it. And it's just a bunch of people who clearly haven't spent any time with it. Now, I haven't spent that much time with it, but we did spend almost 6 hours doing keys today. And all but one key, I accidentally forgot to add it to the dungeon, but all but one key, we had this affix on it. So I do think I've seen a good amount of time with the affix. But before we talk about my thoughts on it, I do want to tell you what Blizzard's thoughts are on it. And this is really important. I think a lot of people have not seen this or they don't understand what these words mean. And I'm just going to read it to you here because it says something very important to you, very important to everybody, okay? It says we're adding a prototype seasonal affix tentatively named Thundering. Now, in my first video on this 2 days ago, we talked a lot about their goals with the seasonal affix. And I'm just going to tell you right now, you can go rewatch that video. The goals that they laid out in that video do not have, they do not align with this affix at all. It's just not, it's not working. It's not what it's supposed to do. It's not a good idea. In general, we'll talk about that, but it's not, it's very important because I've never heard Blizzard use the word prototype before. That's a pretty aggressive term for a game that's in beta even. And they basically said, while development for Dragonflight Mythic Plus is still ongoing, we wanted to give players a look at our progress and are currently planning a limited Mythic Plus test this weekend. It's not even open. It's just open for 3 days. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. And then they go on to say this here. Thoughtful comments. I want to acknowledge all the great and thoughtful comments here, especially around seasonal fixes and the current thundering prototype. So they say it again. We're glad we can offer an early look at our development process with this test. Again, we're glad that we can offer an early look at a development process with this test. So I'm gonna just tell you guys really quickly. Probably about 5 years ago, I had the opportunity to give direct feedback to the upper echelon at this company. And the number one thing I said, there was probably 12 of us or something like that. And I was sitting there. I knew they were going to ask okay, who's got the first question? Just like John Morgan. I'm sitting there my hand is kind of up. I'm waiting, you know what I mean? Because I have only one question and, no offense, I'm sure everybody had great questions or things they wanted to bring up. But I had one that I knew needed to be brought up, and I offered this, and I do honestly think it was received and listened to, and it's shaping the way the game is now. I said basically, I watch all these other game companies and even sports organizations. It's always get ahead of the problem. Okay. I could come up with a million examples. The Yankees had a scandal this year. They release a document before the public can get the news from ESPN. You know what I mean? That's how you beat these problems. And Blizzard did the complete opposite for years. Okay. So I have to give them a lot of respect right now because they actually listened to what I had to say. Whether or not it's because I said it, I don't know. But they actually are doing what I would want them to do, where they actually talk through their development cycles instead of just publish it and then let Wowhead data mine the hell out of it. And I do think we still have that happening here where people are basically jumping to conclusions about this without actually reading what Blizzard is saying about it. We've seen this a lot now with the raid gearing, the personal loot being removed, a lot of this stuff. But Blizzard is actually answering these criticisms. So gotta give them credit. 100% they're doing the right thing here. But they are basically telling us that this is not only not it's not staying this way. It's called a prototype. I've never heard ever once before used from Blizzard called anything called a prototype, meaning they probably don't even like it. They just added it just to see. And I don't know why you would even do that, but that's probably, not even their best iteration. And they also said that they're calling it an early look at the development process. So yeah, my feedback was heard in the way that they're basically saying hey, we know that this is not going to be what it finishes at, but we want you to be along for this process. Okay. And this is exactly what I would recommend that them and every company do. In fact, I went, on the record at that and talked about a company called Paradox. And at the time, I don't really follow the game much anymore, but for the game Crusader Kings 2, they were literally releasing a new post about the game's development every single Friday. No matter what, there would be a post. At 2 p.m. on Friday, there would be a post. And even if they didn't really have anything to say, they would just talk about the development of the game because at the time they were releasing their biggest expansion. And I was like, "This is the way you gotta do it." Like, what do you this is like a company that has probably like 30 employees, you know what I mean? Well, what's the difference here? And they explained to me, it's actually not that easy with a company this big, with this many employees, with this many things, but regardless, let's just move on from that. I just wanted to say that because I'm actually very pleased that they are handling this way, and I think all of you guys who are overreacting, not necessarily the viewers of this channel, but like people out there who are overreacting to this, you got to at least admit that they're doing a much better job communicating it. If you still dislike the decisions they're making, that's fine. But these people who are saying like really completely clueless things, like they don't even play their own game or they are clueless or out of touch, you guys really are not giving them the credit they deserve because absolutely they have improved on this. Whether or not their decision making process is something you agree with, it's just about communication. Like if they tell you, we really don't like the sky being blue, so we're going to change it to red, and they give you a bunch of examples why the sky should be red, and you're like, but the sky is blue. And they're like, well, not in our game. You know what I mean? That's all they can do. Whether I agree with them making that decision, it's irrelevant. As long as they have an actual laid out reason and they can explain that to me, then I live with that decision. So that's what we're seeing here. But they're literally telling us that's not what we're seeing here. We're actually just seeing some haggard ass alpha version of this affix. So on to the actual discussion about the affix. If you haven't actually watched me do anything on the beta this weekend, well, yeah, you missed some bizarre affix. Let's put it that way. It's basically an affix that spawns every, I think it's like a minute and a half or something like that. And it has no actual combat influence. Like it can happen out of combat, in combat, it doesn't matter at all. It literally happens when you start the keystone sometimes. Like you put the keystone in and you're still waiting for the shield thing to come up, to go down, and you get affected by the affix. It basically puts a bunch of blue swirls on the ground that you need to dodge. If you get hit by those, you take damage. I think they stun you too. I'm not really sure if I've been hit by them. I probably have, but you definitely don't want to get hit by those. And then every single person gets affected by a little lightning ring, and that lightning ring will splash damage onto others if you hit them as well. I think it also does damage to you as well. I'm not 100% sure on all this stuff. And then it also shoots out balls, very similar to Prideful. Okay, so people keep comparing this to affixes like Quacking, like Prideful. Yeah, really any area denial affix like Sanguine or Volcanic could be compared here. But one of the things that people keep saying is it's very melee unfriendly. And I think this is a really strange way to put it because, yeah, it's like melee unfriendly in the way that Quacking is melee unfriendly. It's melee unfriendly because melee are idiots. Like, that's it. It's not melee unfriendly. Melee are just stupid and they don't know how to deal with this mechanic. Ranged, it's way more unfriendly for ranged. Ranged have to stop casting. They have to literally lose DPS to do this mechanic. The reason you don't want to bring multiple melee with Quacking is because they're idiots and they just run all over each other and hit each other with it. Ranged are the ones that are actually impacted by this, DPS-wise. Melee could keep attacking with this affix. It doesn't matter whatsoever. And I actually found out a little trick today, which, to be fair, probably almost nobody actually knows. But when the balls spawn that radiate out from you, like the Prideful thing, you actually have immunity to those for a few seconds. I think it might even be up to 2 full seconds. It's hard to be sure. But yeah, so basically if all the melee stand really close to each other, not stacked, because then the small ring that you have will do damage to each other. But anyway, if you all stand really close to each other, but not inside that ring, the balls will just go right past you. They don't stun you. So this is like, so TLDR, dude, what are my thoughts on this affix? It's the easiest seasonal affix they've ever added. Like, it's a complete joke. It does nothing. It actually does nothing. It's literally like, oh, move out of a blue swirl and then don't be directly stacked on each other. It's actually like easier than Quacking, honestly, because it doesn't silence you. Like, it's actually easier, to be honest. Like, it really is the easiest seasonal affix they've ever added. And if you're comparing it to other affixes like of its type, from BFA, like inspiring, or what's it called? I can't remember the one with the handmaidens. That was like the hardest one ever, right? You compare it to that one or infested. This affix is nowhere near as difficult as those. Okay, nowhere near as difficult. And people keep trying to compare it to Prideful, which is really funny to me because it has like one small thing that's similar to Prideful, and the fact that it shoots out this kind of like bunch of balls that radiate out. And the other cool thing about this is it's a lot easier to see those. Okay, but I do think the hitbox on those just doesn't really work, because even when I don't have that immunity, I see these orbs kind of like fly over my head and they don't stun me. So I don't know what's going on there, but it's obviously not working very well. But regardless, it's not related to. I mean, Prideful's main thing was that it spawned a really, really difficult mob every 20%. Like if you tell me, if you ask me to summarize Prideful, I'm gonna tell you it spawns a giant red dude every 20% that buffs you when you kill him. Had nothing to do with. Who cares about the projectile part? So that's how trivial this mechanic. I mean, it's really not a mechanic, guys. So everybody who's saying it's like really unfun, or well, let's not say unfun, because I can understand that criticism. People who are saying it's like the common like 12-year-old quote, it's cancer. You know what I mean? Like a disease that kills thousands of people, maybe hundreds of thousands of people a year. Yeah, let's compare it to that. It's not a very good affix. I get it, but it's not. It's a very easy affix. I've done we did probably like 10 keys today with it. Not even close to dangerous. And I'm gonna tell you right now, maybe I'm a little biased because it's Blood DK. It doesn't exist. Like I could AMS or Icebound out of the stun. It did like 30k damage to me, dude. I get hit by it for like 30k nature damage. Okay, that's really dangerous. But I get it. Maybe as melee DPS, it's different. But I just want to tell you right now, this is not true about the melee unfriendliness. Yeah, I see why people say that, because oftentimes melee is clustered, but that's just how melee works. Okay, so if you maintain spacing well with your other melee practitioners, this affix does not actually complicate your life. You can still DPS, you can still do everything you're supposed to do, and they seem to have an added benefit, an immunity to the stun, to give you a little bit more of an edge. Whereas ranged are not going to have that immunity. They are going to get hit by the the mechanics if they're not too close to each other. But range are actually going to have to constantly move out of these things. I saw multiple I shot a shadow priest complaining like crazy today because he constantly was in the middle of big channels or casts or something, and this affix would come out and then he was just moving, and they don't all come at once, these swirls. So you have like one and then another and then another. So that patented thing where you move 3 times within 3 seconds, So that is way more impactful for ranged. It has the potential to be just as dangerous for ranged as it does melee. And again, the only reason that anybody ever thinks any of these things for melee are tough is just because of the slap happy way that people play melee, where they're like demon hunters are dashing all around and hitting each other with mechanics, So it's kind of a reputation that that the role has had. But I do want to tell you a little bit about some things that you might be surprised to hear about with this affix. I think it's actually a very clever way to reset the difficulty problems with Mythic Plus. Because right now it's pretty clear to me in Season 4 of Shadowlands that we have a very, very, very overpowered affix. And I think that this game is not better for it. I like it. I think it's really fun because I love having a ton of haste. Like I have 40% extra haste or something like that. That's awesome. That's just awesome. I love the way that plays. I love the feeling that you have when you have that much haste. But it's not good for the game. And I think it's really, really, really bad for pugging, because as we see all the time on my stream, we constantly see people who have absolutely no idea what they're doing. Like their class might as well not exist to them. They don't have any basic understanding of even core utility features. Like we see this all the time with hunters, misdirect, turtle not being used. I mean, even as far as say bloodlust not being used, going whole dungeons without hunters lusting. This is not necessarily because of the affix, obviously, but it's exacerbated because those people should not be doing 20s. Let's put it that way. They should not be approaching 18, 19, 20. These people are objectively just not good at the video game. They don't know how to play their character, and they're not, maybe they can do good damage, but they're not bringing the toolkit that you would expect for somebody at that level. And I do think that's because of the affix, because it's basically to a point now where if you have like 2 good damage dealers, they're going to get so much, and even DPS and tank DPS and healer DPS, they're going to get so much value from this affix that a fifth player isn't even required to upgrade these keys. Like it's easy. You know what I mean? Like if you go to Junkyard with 4 players who keep bots the whole time and have the haste buff the whole time, you don't need a fifth player to upgrade that key. You might not even need a fifth player to double upgrade that key. You know what I mean? So there's just some massive outliers in this system right now. And to be honest, they spared us because I do think if versatility was the option, we'd all be using verse. And I would be very interested to see what this game would look like with like 30% more verse on every single player. But, you know, they spared us that. I think it'd probably be even worse. Then you'd have just people who are literally just bathing in mechanics and living because they have, you know, 20% extra damage reduction and stuff. But anyway, yeah, so that affix is going to haunt us, I think, for years to come, man. I really do. And, you know, I think it's not, I think we're going to be living that problem for a long time. And so basically what they said with this affix was that they wanted to make an affix that would not give us borrowed power. Okay, so this, like I said, this is nonsense. What they're saying here is just stupid. It's one of those cases where whoever's designing this current iteration of the affix is clearly not the same person writing this post because it just doesn't even make sense. The thing they said about this, like the philosophy and what we actually have in game, it's just stupid. It's just not correlated at all. So it's a bad case of PR, I would have to say. It's not certainly the design fault because they are literally telling us that this is not in a state that they feel comfortable publishing, but they're doing it basically help us out. And so we're doing, you know, them a favor by doing all these tests with this nonsense affix. But the people who are just saying like this affix is completely unplayable and all this stuff, they're kind of just missing the point. So what I wanted to say about how you can fix this affix, I'm going to tell you the short answer, okay? You cannot go back from a kiss curse affix. If you're not aware, this affix is only curse. It's not kiss. You don't, no kiss. I mean, just like me, you know, don't, no kiss, never. Anyway, yeah, so it's very, that's just not like, I'm just going to tell you, right, that's a bad idea. I don't really, you know, whatever, you can do whatever you want with your game, but it's just not smart because you've gotten people used to this. And so now you're just taking it away from them. You know what I mean? Like we've been saying for years, they should just remove Feral Druid from the game, but you just can't because people have gotten used to it being such a laughing stock that if they removed it, there would be some people that would be mad. It's the same case here with this affix thing. So what they need to do is they need to make this affix actually do damage to the enemies. And that's it. You solve the problem. Whatever. If they leave it exactly as it is, okay, it doesn't matter if it's, you know, bad for melee. It's melee unfriendly. That's a good thing now. You've solved the problem, right? Because now if you have multiple melee that are crowding the boss, that's going to be more value, you know? Whereas if you have it at range, those people have to move into melee to do something with it, you know? So it's like it solves the problem. Entire problem is solved perception wise. Is it a better affix that way? No, it still kind of sucks. It's just stupid. It's just really a dumb affix. The thing that I don't like about it is how it's based on your character's position. I haven't actually conducted this experiment, but I'm pretty sure that if you had all 5 players stacked, you would just have a giant ring of circles around you that you couldn't possibly move out of. And I'm not talking about the actual one on your character. I'm talking about the one that spawn, the dodgeable things that spawn. Because it looks like volcanic to me. You ever watch volcanic when you have a lot of enemies? They spawn at a very fixed location around your character in this big ring. It's like 10 yards around your character. The first time I ever noticed this was when I was soloing Underrot. Underrot used to, or Scrundy Snot, sorry. Scrundy Snot used to have, the last boss used to have these like floating orbs. It's kind of like that, right? It was cool. And they had the ability to spawn volcanic. And you would kill them and they would do some, I don't even remember the fight, to be honest. But anyway, it would cause you to have a lot of volcanic. And when I was soloing that, I wasn't killing them. So there would just be 40 volcanic. It would be like Mount Vesuvius. Like I was literally in a volcano. The whole around my character was volcanoes. Every possible spawn location of a volcanic that could spawn was spawned. And that's what this affix feels like. It feels like you're completely covered in a lightning thing. And it's like, help, I'm under attack. You know what I mean? It's just like really overwhelming. The visuals don't really work. They look like kind of janky and not really well defined. And it just doesn't, it just looks dumb. It's just kind of silly looking. It's like way over balanced. Like the whole thing is like really big. The whole thing is just way too big. But it's only around your characters. So the thing that's really dumb is when you're running and it's spawning, it's like blocking you from running. It's like in front of you and you're like, oh, oh hold on. Like you can't run. You're like sitting there waiting for the affix to end. And the other thing that's really dumb about this affix is it's just insanely overpowered against some bosses. Like the last boss in Ruby Life Pools, the boss already has a ton of area denial. So then this affix on top of that boss's mechanic, it's like that's like one of the worst fights ever. I think it's like actually one of like probably like the last boss of Tol Dagor is probably the worst boss ever, but that's because it just didn't work. This boss works well and it still sucks. So I don't really want to see that on top of that as well. But who knows? I don't know what their next iteration is, but my recommendation would be simply make it a Kiss Curse affix. And they talked about they consider doing that again. They don't want to do that though, because they don't want to give us a bunch of borrowed power, quote unquote. They don't want that to influence what classes are being brought. But I don't know why they would say that, because there's no reason to think in those terms. You could simply make it just do a flat amount of damage. It doesn't need to be based on your character stats. It doesn't need to be based on anything other than the dungeon and the affixes and the level of the key. That's all you need. And I think really the best affix, even though I didn't enjoy pugging with it that much, the best affix for this concept would be Season 4 Battle for Azeroth, which was, I can never remember the name of it, but basically you went in a portal and you could go anywhere in the dungeon when you were in there. It was not a power affix at all. It did not give you any power. The mobs didn't even give you count, right? I'm pretty sure they didn't even give you count. So it was literally just, can you use this to your advantage? If not, just kill the mob and move on. And that's pretty much the pinnacle of it. Then we started adding these ones that give us power. And yeah, I could see why they wouldn't want those to return, because we went from Prideful, which was like actually really difficult to kill and honestly was not worth, like if you could skip every single Prideful, you probably would do that. Like the power you got from it was nowhere near as valuable as the damage and time loss on the mob. And a lot of times you can just wipe to the Prideful. So then it went better and better and better, higher and higher and higher power, to the point that we have now Season 4 where people are just like quadrupling their stats. And it's like, that's, now I can see why they're saying what they're saying, So so what do I think of the affix overall? Like it's just not going to go live. It's just, there's no way it's going to go live this way. And that's not even because I'm like being indignant about it. They literally tell us that. So there's no reason to really be worried about it. But to be honest, it's not as bad as everyone says it is. Like, it really isn't. It does nothing. It really does nothing. And that's not a good thing, because it should do something. It should do something. It should not do nothing. Even the voice line for it is kind of dumb. And the other thing I really don't like about it is the fact that it changes the screen to like a really dark blue effect. It's actually quite hard to see. And this is going to be like very personal for me, but when I'm playing during the day, I have a lot of sun shining down on my eyes. So when the screen gets really dark, I literally can't see the game. Like, it gets so dark that the sun coming from the window, it's like now I'm blinded to the game is not visible to me. That happened multiple times. So I think everybody needs to just chill out. Let's see what the next iteration is. You gotta give feedback, but I think at this point they know, like they literally said out loud that this is not going to go live this way. So I don't really think it's that big of a deal. But I would just say that, once you go back from Kiss Curse, yeah, you start treading a difficult line. I think we should be moving to purely Kiss Curse. I think every single affix should be Kiss Curse. And I was going to make a video on that. So if you're interested in a video like that, let me know. I might make a video like that. But my thoughts on making every affix Kiss Curse, I'd be very interested. I have some very interesting topics. So anyway, that's my thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts are, because especially if you played it, I'd love to hear it. I think it's pretty clear. Like, let's just get this out of the way. Nobody likes it. I don't like it. Nobody likes it. Not even Blizzard likes it. So let's move on from that. Let's try to be constructive and build on what we have here and make something out of this, because it's clear that it's not going to be the way it is right now when it goes live. So what can they do to make it even better?